first things first, I had to level the area as much as I could. And we had dumped this topsoil, was supposed to be topsoil in my garden space to try to bring up the level a little bit, and turns out it is a rock hard soil. I don't even know if it would be classified as soil, but it actually did do pretty well. Once I got it leveled out, it did pretty well as being a base medium for my concrete blocks to sit on, but man, was it a pain trying to get it leveled out and smooth enough to be able to rake. So here you see me, I'm attempting to put in some straight lines to follow. I ended up ditching this idea because it didn't really work for me. I just did it by eye after this. You see me do it on this first bed. This is the first bed that I did, and I didn't record the entire process of this. My kids really wanted to help me do that, so I allowed them to help me on this one, and then I record the entire process for the next bed. But you can see that I'm doing just the prep work here. If you were going to be doing these beds, it just kind of gives you an idea of what you could and slash should do based on other videos that I watched. This is the progress that I had gotten to. I'm just showing you that. It was much harder on this bed than the other one. This bed took me days, and the bed that you're going to see me do from start to finish took me a day slash maybe a couple hours. So for whatever reason, the second bed really took me a lot quicker. Got to get in some mighty snugs here, some scratches. He's such a good, loyal garden dog. He's almost always right here in the garden with me, baking himself in the sun, which makes no sense to me why dogs do that, but they must get some benefit from it because I see multiple dogs doing that. So here is the first bed completely done, and I got it all leveled out, so it's nice to walk around the entire bed, making sure all the cinder blocks are nice and snug. But I didn't want to bring the ground level up too high because I want the benefit of having the raised bed as high as possible. So I want to limit the amount of bending over that I'm doing. So I'm just showing you here what it looks like at the end, and then this is where I'm going to be doing the second garden bed. Now here I'm preparing for the second garden bed. I'm getting some of that soil, I'm putting it right on top of the grass, and I'm going to be creating a level surface for me to start building the concrete or putting the concrete blocks on top of. So here I have a bit of a grade. I guess you can kind of see it in this video, but down to the right is lower because it's a little bit of a swale where the grading of our property lets the water run off from the house. So I'm building that area up a little bit and not putting very much at this end that I'm working on now. So I'm just making sure that the ground is level and the blocks are meshing together perfectly, or as perfectly as I can, and I'm testing it here because I don't want the top blocks to rock back and forth, kind of like that one's doing, which is bothering me. But it turns out that in the molding process of the concrete blocks, they leave little tabs, and so I was just using the shovel to scrape those off, and that helped make it so that it wasn't rocking quite as much. It was tolerable for me at that point because I am going to put some like mortar caulk in between, so I knew that there was going to be something in between that would help kind of level that little rocking out. So here I'm just going to keep on keeping on. It's just a repetitive process over and over again, flattening out the earth, putting the concrete block on there, getting more concrete blocks, and it was my fault that we put the concrete pallet this far away from where I was actually going to be building the blocks or building the beds. I thought that I was going to be building the first bed in a different spot. So here I started carrying them. Later I figure out that the wheelbarrow is a much better option. But here we're just continuing the process of leveling the ground, putting the block in, making sure that it meshes with the other block, making sure it doesn't rock back and forth, and making sure that it's really pounded down as much as possible so that when the block settles, hopefully they will still be as flush as possible. Once again, you can see Mighty here supervising the project from underneath the arbor. He had found some shade there, which the loofah is providing quite a bit of shade. It's been really nice here during the day. Probably high 70s, low 80s, but the sun is still pretty hot, so he found this nice shady spot here supervising my work, wondering why, once again, I'm still not using the wheelbarrow to carry the concrete blocks. I learned after my back was really starting to hurt, I learned that the wheelbarrow is a much better option. So here I figured out that if I put 3 blocks across like it was going to be the end of the bed, it helped me stay somewhat straight on the line and make sure that I wasn't going too far off or too far in. It didn't work out perfectly, as you will see at the end of the project. This side that I'm working on now has a little bit of a wonky corner, but I'm okay with it. I like a little bit of character to my garden, and I'm just gonna go with that. I'm just gonna go with the fact that it's gonna give a little bit of character to my garden. But that was a good way for me to try to make sure that I was still lining up the bed so that it was going to be a rectangle and not some kind of strange oblong shape that doesn't have a name. So that's what I found worked out best for that, because on the other bed, when I got to the end, it was quite a bit off, so I had to redo about half of the bed, and I did not want to have to do that on this one. And I finally figure out that using the wheelbarrow is a little bit better of an idea rather than carrying two at a time. Granted, this wheelbarrow is a little bit rickety, and that's kind of why I didn't start out using it, because I wasn't sure if it was going to be able to handle the weight, but I decided that I wanted to take the risk, so I started using that, and it made a big difference. So I would bring them over here and put them down on the ground, and then just kind of bring them from the ground, and then give Mighty some more snugs. As you can see, he's now baking himself again, and he kept doing that. He would go in and out of the shade, so sunbathing must have some kind of benefit for them. This hand tiller worked really well for just bringing up this dirt enough to be able to either flatten it on the top, or in this case I'm using it to break up so that I can shovel it, because it's hard enough to where putting a shovel into it's really difficult. So here I'm placing the last couple blocks and discovering that something went wrong during the build. That this one corner is going to be potentially wonky and off. I still really am not sure exactly how or why it went wrong, but once again, I'm just gonna label it as having some character, and that's what I'm gonna go with, and it's gonna be okay. It's on the back corner of this bed, and when it's full of plant, not going to be seen in great detail anyway, and even if it is, it's a little bit of character. I do not pretend to be a professional at this, and living the authentic life here on YouTube, you get to see the authenticity of the wonky corner. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm just going to call it the wonky corner or the character corner, and we're just going to go with it. They are not perfectly straight. They're not perfectly perfect, but that is okay. I absolutely love how they turned out, and we're just going to go with that. So here are the two beds all finished. They haven't been caulked at this point, which is like the cement stuff that I put in between them, but just showing the finished product before that. They are so nice looking. I really like how it turned out. I'm really excited to do the rest of the beds like this, and I just like how clean they look, and I'm surprised at just how much I like them. Here's the second one, the one we just did. This is the one that I did from start to finish on video in its glory, even with a little wonky corner, character corner down there. Now to do this project, you're definitely going to want to get yourself some good gloves. As you can see in this clip, the concrete just shreds gloves. Now these were cheap dollar store gloves. Next stage, these are the products that I used to put the concrete blocks, stick the concrete blocks together. So the first thing that I'm going to do, what I found out with the other bed, was that taking all of one side off of the top and then putting the caulk in between and then putting the concrete back on top was the best way to go about it. The other bed was my tester bed, and I tried to do it just one at a time, and it was way labor intensive and quite frustrating. So just taking the whole side off and then putting it back on was much easier and much quicker. This process took me maybe 10 minutes for the entire bed. So definitely recommend that versus trying to do one at a time once you've set them all up there. And this material that I used, I got from Walmart, and it was much cheaper than Lowe's or Home Depot. I don't know what the difference in adhesive was, once again, I'm not a professional, so there might be some very specific difference, and that's why it was cheaper. But for my application, this worked perfectly fine, and it has adhered them together really well. And the great thing about it is it doesn't stop the blocks from moving just a little bit. So whenever it freezes or gets really cold, it allows the heaving process to happen just enough so that the cinder blocks do not crack or break, and then the mortar doesn't crack and break. So that is why I went with this particular product, as well as just the ease of use. When we got the concrete blocks, we did actually get a bag of mortar that had to be mixed up and all the things. And I quickly realized that that was not within my wheelhouse to mix and smear and, all of the things, making sure that it looked nice. I was quite convinced that it would come out looking like quite a bit of a hot mess if I did it that way. As you can see, I'm stretching my back out because it's quite labor intensive. You will definitely feel it in your body, but it is well worth it. So here you can see I am putting the mortar on, the squeezable mortar, the slime, the goo. So here I'm just moving on to the other side, giving you guys a little bit of a different perspective through the beautiful arbor with the giant loofah on it. I'm just taking all of the concrete blocks off first, and then I'm going to smear the goo, and then I'm going to put them all back on. And like I said, this process was really quick and easy, especially with that caulk gun, it really made it very easy and very quick to do. And then finally, I'm just going around the bed and seeing if there was any oozy bits that came out. And if there was, I'm just wiping it off and wiping it in the grass or in the dirt. I just didn't want it to look oozy and I didn't want it to stay looking like that. I'm also looking for any crooked blocks, so you'll see that I straighten out a couple blocks that just I didn't place them quite straight. And that's the great thing about this squeezy mortar goo also, is that it doesn't harden instantly. I think it says about 30 minutes to harden. So I was able to go back probably 15 minutes later and just make sure that it was straight.